Hello, friends. Thank you for joining His Love is Power podcast. I'm your host, Ken Porter. His Love is Power podcast is about encouraging men to be in community with other men that want to grow in relationship with Jesus. Why do we feel this is so important? Well, because God's word tells us in Hebrews 10, 24, and 25, and let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. You see, we are created to live in community. This podcast is about people sharing their stories of coming to know and follow Jesus, but also about how being in community with other followers of Jesus has changed their lives. Please join us in this adventure as we spur each other on towards love, good deeds, and encourage one another in Jesus. Gerald, we lovingly call you G. You're one of my best friends. I love you immensely. I've known you for quite a while, and I've known you because we've walked through transition in a men's group together for a very long time. And I'm just really thrilled that you said yes, that you would come and do this podcast with me. So thank you and welcome to His Love is Power podcast.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. Thanks for twisting my arm to finally do this.
It didn't take it took a little twisting. It took a little twisting, but I'll just share quickly when you called me that day and you said, I want to talk about the podcast. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to get told no. This is what I'm going to get told no. Okay, fine. I love G anyway. I don't care. And we're talking and you're like, I've been praying about it. And yeah, I'll do it. I think I'm supposed to do it. It's like, yes.
Yeah. Well, this wasn't the first time you've kind of hinted at wanting me on it, and I've not taken the bait before.
Well, it's an honor for me to have you on here for so many reasons. I just want to thank you for this. And the podcast is about transformation into the likeness of Christ, how God has changed us and how we've followed him. I just want to start off by having you share your story. What is your story coming kind of before Jesus? How'd you come to know Jesus? And what did your walk look like after coming to know Jesus? And especially when you had all that hair.
Yeah, sure. I can't remember that far back. Well, yeah, I appreciate it. I told you I've been reticent to do this, partly because the whole idea of transformation to me has been really impressed upon me in the last, I don't know, 6, 7 years, and I've been on this journey changing. And I have a little difficulty with, oh yeah, let's do this podcast, and then I probably won't be the same person 6 months from now, a year from now, for sure. Hopefully, I won't be this person. So when people look at it, they'll go, "Wow, that G's kind of a strange guy," and I don't know why I would believe those kinds of things. But yeah, so I got to tell you this. I got to tell you this story, KP. So when you asked me, um, and I said yes every night. It's probably been what, 4 weeks, 5 weeks maybe since I
think
said
about 4 weeks.
yeah, yeah. So every night, lately I'm old, but I have to get up in the middle of the night often to go to the bathroom. And honest to goodness, every night after I go to the bathroom, I lie in bed and God starts talking to me for like an hour or more about me, because I've never been satisfied with my story and how I would tell it in a meaningful kind of way. And he has been just transforming how I view my life in a very positive way. But transformation is a slow process, supposedly, right? And
Oh,
so
it is a slow. That's not one of your strengths.
yeah, exactly. I am impatient. Let's get on. Okay, I see that. I need to change that. Let's get it done. So every night, for an hour, and but I have not cursed you during the night, okay? I have not. But I have gotten here recently just saying, Dad, I need some sleep. Can you just stop talking to me and let me get some sleep here? If you think about somebody who's wanting an intimate relationship, I don't think that's probably the best thing to be saying, but you get desperate. So,
Well, you couldn't pick a better time, right?
yeah,
Come on,
exactly.
man. Well, the thing is that to just stay on this for a moment, in that, when we talked about this, when you said yes, this was one of the topics we talked about is that we're constantly being transformed. And you were kind of worried about, it's like I could look back on this and go, I'm a different person now, right? And I guess the idea was what it's a moment in time, right? Who are we now? How did we get here, right?
Yeah,
And we are constantly changing in Christ. That is part of the process, right? It's a constant, you never arrive. That's
right.
part of the deal. We are never going to arrive. But I thought that was such great insight. I love that because I'm thinking, oh, yeah, that's such a and you are full of lots of brilliant insights. So when you said that, I thought it was just spectacular. It's like, oh gosh, that's so true, right?
Yeah,
We are constantly changing. So
yeah. So I've kind of come to the conclusion that if if it's not meaningful to anybody who watches it, I'm good with that because it's been meaningful to me this whole process leading up to doing this. So it's been worth it for me. I guess the other thing that has made me reticent to do it is I'm not a natural talker. I'm a natural listener and a thinker, and I'll blurt out something, but it's going to be short, concise, and done with. Yeah, we joke this might go 20 minutes if I really drag it out, but
yeah, then we talked for 50 minutes on the phone
yeah,
that day.
let's get to it, okay?
Awesome, man.
So, it'll be a Reader's Digest version, and I think what I'm going to do is, as I get to certain points, I'm going to editorialize on them and kind of point out how I think they're meaningful to me, but. Um, And certainly, if you don't understand anything I'm saying, because it all, I might get excited and start talking way too fast, and it'll make sense to me, but it won't to you. So,
I cannot wait because I know a bit of your story, and I think the viewers will get a lot out of this. So
yeah.
I don't want you to editor, or I don't want you to hold back.
Okay. Well, it's not, it's not an exciting story in my mind, but yeah, maybe it could be helpful maybe. So yeah, I mentioned earlier I'm old. I was born in 1951, so I just say that so people get a little context. Was coming of age in the late 60s, early 70s, so typical baby boomer. Born into a family with a mom and a dad and a sister that was 3 years older than me. Started school well, I was born in Oregon City, Oregon, and started school in this town in more southern Oregon called Cottage Grove, where my parents had moved because my dad had taken a job there. They met in I guess you would call it a clothing store, dry goods kind type of store in Oregon City where they both worked. And then my mom stopped working when she started having had my sister and me, and my dad took this job down in Cottage Grove in this department store down there because it was a promotion type of thing for him. And my dad is 15 years older than my mother. He was 45 when I was born, and that's important, and I'll get into that later, but just keep that in mind. And my dad was uh, a very quiet man, not expressive, didn't talk a lot, didn't, make his opinions known. And it was a source of great frustration to my mom and caused some conflict in the marriage. But, um, they were loving, couldn't couldn't ask for parents that were more supportive of me. And yeah, when I was in the second grade, we moved to this little town in Western Oregon called Sheridan. It's about 50 miles south of Portland, 30 miles west of Salem, about an hour away from the coast, Lincoln City there, because they had purchased this clothing store uh, in Sheridan called the Merc, famous place in Sheridan during my time, but it's the only clothing store there. They both kind of worked in it at that point because they needed more than one person working. It was a fairly good sized store. Sheridan was a small town, farming and lumber oriented. So there were two sawmills and plywood making plants in between the Sheridan and another town, Willamina, just south of there, west of there. And so the population of the city was like 1,900 people. The high school here in South Kitsap has probably a third more than that people just going to high school.
Yeah.
So, so I say that because it's small, and because of that, I was afforded a lot of opportunities that I probably wouldn't have been if I'd been going to a bigger school. So, like in high school, well, even in grade school, I played in the band, I played sports, I was in speech club, um, was in college prep courses in the high school, and I was a decent athlete, but if I'd been going to a bigger school, I would have never made the team, but had those opportunities. So it was pretty well. And then I was also in, each year the junior and senior class in the school put on a play. So I got to be in those as well. So I had a pretty broad experience of things that, a lot of kids might not have had exposure to, especially if they were going to a big school. In that regards, it was good good experience for me. When I was in the fifth grade, my parents made us start picking strawberries and beans out in the field. I guess they loved me, but I didn't feel the love in that because especially strawberries, it's hot, there's no shade. And then
I picked strawberries from Marysville. I came from the strawberry capital of the world. I know what
yes,
that's like.
no.
Yes.
Picking beans, pole beans, it's better because one side's always on the shade, but because my sister was older than me, she always made me pick on the sunny side, and so that wasn't much fun either. But those were good experiences. Part of how I got to college was picking beans and strawberries because they made me save that money. And um, you know, running right through the town was a river called the Yamhill River, and I don't know how it happened, but my parents bought me this two-man rubber raft, and they would take me way out in the country to a creek that flowed into the Yamhill River, and I would float down the Yamhill River all by myself with no life preserver or anything, because that was back in the day where seatbelts didn't exist, or we didn't even lock the doors on our houses at that time. Never had a house key.
That resonates with me because I wound up my parents had a place over near Lake Wenatchee, and we wound up buying a raft, and they would throw me in up above plane, and I would by myself again, no life jacket, and I would go down to the mouth of the Tumwater Canyon. Now I would not go down the Tumwater Canyon because it's really rapid, but up above there was rapid enough, let me tell you. I did that multiple times by myself. I loved it. I
Yeah,
loved that adventure.
yeah, it was great fun, you know. So yeah, there weren't a lot of rapids, but there were some places where it got a little swift, but it was good because, you know, my parents could drop me off and then the Yamhill River went right by the store where my parents lived, so I or worked. So I just would pull the raft in at this spot right behind their store and then they could take me home later after work. So yeah, great fun in high school. Great fun. When I was a senior, our football team made it to the state playoffs. I think for the first time ever in history, we made it to the first the first game was a quarterfinals, and we played this team from Portland called North Catholic, and they were huge, and we weren't, and we got beat, but it was pretty exciting to be in it at that
Yeah,
point.
great experience.
So I guess some of the earliest memories that I have as a kid involve church. I don't think there was ever, I know for me, there was never a time when my family wasn't going to church. So, you know, in Cottage Grove, when I was really young, we were attending church regularly. When we moved to Sheridan, we attended the Nazarene church there, you know, small church, maybe 30 to 50 in attendance. And you went Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. And my parents were there every night that it was open. And the only spanking I ever remember in my life was when I put up a fuss about going to church on a Wednesday night one time, and I got a spanking for it. So that just kind of shows you the commitment they had for
Sure.
it. Um, but you know, it's important. That's an important fact because it plays into kind of how my Christian life played out. So I asked Jesus into my heart when I was a young teenager. I don't remember exactly how old I was. I remember vividly how it all happened and played out, but just don't remember the year. So I had this long experience of going to church prior to accepting Jesus as my Savior. And I think as I've just kind of learned here in the last month that uh, I was kind of a victim or a product of the times where the American evangelicalism was kind of interested in sin and going to heaven, and that was kind of the emphasis. And you know, I kind of hesitate to say I was a victim because I think God holds us accountable. He gives us what we need to do, what we need to do with Him, but you know, none of that really took with me after I accepted Christ. So long history of going to church, accept Jesus, and not much changed in essence after that. You know, even to the point where recently I've been going, I wonder if I was a Christian even back then or not. But in these late night talks with dad, he's told me no, you were, and he's shown me how that has all worked out.
But now, how cool of a blessing
Yeah,
is that?
yeah.
That,
That's
I
why,
mean, for him to share that with you, to talk to you about this, so you're gonna share your story, and it's like, no, you were. How cool is
yeah.
our dad to do something like that?
The you know, I just felt the love in all of that from him. That no, you are beloved, and I have been caring for you, and um, yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. So probably, you know, so what didn't happen at the moment of my salvation that would have been really helpful to me is if there had been somebody to mentor me in how you meld the divine and the humanity, so God's dwelling in me now. I don't know how that works, and I don't know what to do and how that all works. So, you have to jump forward in my life to dudes before I learn how all that occurred. So we should probably just explain, shouldn't we, that when we say dudes, that is the Saturday
Saturday.
community group
Yeah.
that we're involved with.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. We started off calling ourselves Saturdudes for a long time, and then we've just kind of shortened it to dudes.
yeah, but
One thing, go, sorry.
yeah, that's the community that
Yeah.
that we'll be talking about. Go ahead.
And, uh, now you've had one thing that led you to to Saturdudes was you were going to a church in your local community and you felt led to go to a different church in Gig Harbor, correct?
Yep, yep.
And if I remember right, that church really wasn't feeding you, right? Wasn't developing a relationship, right?
Yeah.
What was that? What was Just describe that a bit. Like what was kind of that feeling of going to a church that felt like it wasn't developing your relationship with Jesus?
Do you want to go there now, or do you want to get there in the chronology?
Oh yeah, keep going. I thought you were jumping forward. Keep going.
No,
Sorry.
no, no. I'll get there because I
Yeah,
will explain. I will explain all that because it's
awesome.
pretty significant. So all during this time, I did the best that I could under what I knew. I prayed, I read my Bible, but nobody was really mentoring me in a personal relationship with Jesus and how that works out and what it involves. And so that whole spiritual relationship side never really developed. But, I was, a lot of times during my life, I wasn't going to church regularly and all that, but never gave up on my faith or thinking of that was an important part of my life. Graduated from high school when the the year I graduated, I took this summer job down in Bryce Canyon National Park in Utah. I rode a Greyhound bus all by myself from Salem, Oregon to Cedar City, Utah, and then on out to Bryce Canyon. Worked for 70 cents an hour plus room and board. Got to start out washing pots and pans. It was the lowest job in the kitchen. Part of that was because I got there late because my sister got married sometime in early June, and I was supposed to be there in early June, but had to delay it. Even in that short summer, I worked my way up to, I think it was called pantry, where, in the morning you made the pancakes and then did salads and stuff like that. Came back in early September and went to Seattle Pacific College in Seattle. And it was important to me to go to a Christian college because I knew if I went to a secular college, that what relationship I did have with God would probably be in jeopardy, and that it was important for me to have that worldview. So, and the choice was made because Seattle Pacific gave me better financial aid than Northwest Nazarene College in Nampa, Idaho, which is the school that my church would have preferred that I go to because they were associated with it. But so here I am, this kid from this town of 1900 going to this college, which I don't know, probably had 3,000 kids, which is small, but it's in the middle of Seattle, on the north side of Queen Anne Hill, right next to the canal, and then just over Queen Anne is Seattle Center. And I've been to Portland a few times, but never lived in a huge place like that. But yeah, it was
Culture shock.
yeah, yeah. Lived in the dorm. All 4 years of my college career, and it was a blast. We had such great fun, and it was it was a culture, but it didn't transform me in a in a positive way necessarily. And it was so the campus was kind of you go from the canal, which is the lowest part, and then it starts going up Queen Anne Hill. The campus kind of goes up the hill for a few blocks, and we lived in the dorm at the highest point on campus on the top floor, sixth floor of this dorm. So you could look out over the whole campus and see everything, but you had to walk up these pretty steep hills, which wasn't fun in the snow and all that. But um, and we were on a floor where my roommate actually thinks that they did an experiment that year where they made the majority of the guys that were on that floor were freshmen like us when we started. The upperclassmen, there were some, but very few, and a lot of them were, they weren't into dorm life and all that. They had other things going on with them. And, we kind of formed this whole culture ourselves, these freshmen, and there were a lot of smart guys there. I was pretty good in high school with mastering the American education system and did well, ended up being valedictorian of my class of 45 kids. So, nothing to brag about, but um, and did well in college as well academically. But there were a lot of smart guys there, and we did a lot of mischievous things that probably developed a reputation on campus that wasn't the greatest, but we had a lot of fun. Met my wife when we were in our junior year. That always sounds funny to me. I just met my wife. I met this girl who later became my wife, right? So yeah, we joke that we met over a dead frog because we both had gotten these part-time jobs as lab assistants in one of the biggest classes on campus called anatomy and physiology. We were lab assistants in the lab part of that class, and I, for some reason, was the head lab assistant. And part of my job was to create the quizzes for the labs, and the assistants were supposed to give me questions, and then I would just compile them and compose the quiz. Well, that didn't work out so hot. The only one that gave me questions was this girl who would later become my wife. And, I didn't think much about it until it just kept happening over and over where she was the only one. Then we would spend time putting it together, and, one thing led to another, and, we started dating. Why she kept up with me is beyond me, because I was a strange dude back in those days. And our first date, I didn't have a car. So our first date, my roommate took us to a high school football game where she had gone to high school, Queen Anne High School. We went to this football game, and he and I were laughing and joking about stuff, and she was just kind of left out on the side. So
I was going to say, you got chauffeured. You're like, who needs a car, man? I got a chauffeur.
exactly. But yeah, so we got married the September after we graduated in June. I was a psychology major. Those were the kinds of courses that were of most interest to me, and that's where I got my major. And the plan was I wanted to go to graduate school to get a degree in counseling psychology, but I was not a resident of Washington because I was from Oregon, so I had to spend a year living in Washington before I could become a resident, which would lower the tuition and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I
Right.
did. I worked in a bank after we got married. I worked in a bank and got fired from that, and then worked in a mortgage company for the rest of that year before going to Central Washington State College, where I got my master's in counseling. Out of graduate school, got this job down in Walla Walla in the juvenile probation department as a family counselor, where it was a new position, and I was supposed to be working with the parents of these kids that were coming into contact with the law in a negative kind of way. And it was a good experience, but I got to the point where, I just didn't feel comfortable doing counseling without being able to bring God and the Christian perspective into it, and that just wasn't going to happen in that setting. So I got I applied to the state of Washington for a psychology position up in Bellingham in what was called the Department of Developmental Disability. So we can't say mental retardation now because it's not politically correct, but that was the term back then. And now, you call them people with intellectual disabilities. I worked there, we moved there in 1978. So worked in Walla Walla a little over 2 years, then moved up there, worked there for about 9 months and took a transfer promotion to this little institution for intellectually disabled people who were primarily autistic and young kids under the age of 15. Once they were 15, they had to move to a bigger, different institution somewhere. Never had exposure to people with intellectual disabilities prior to getting that job, and didn't know anything about autism until I took that job. But I I've realized now, just in the last few months, one of the things that I have been involved in my transformation walk is this podcast called Bema Discipleship that one of the guys in the Dudes turned us on to, and it has just been transformative in my transformation. And one of the things that he makes really clear in there is that God is for the oppressed and the people in prison and
Yep. The
those kinds
foreigner. Yep.
of justice. He's for justice. And I realized that he put me into those positions because I have passion for things, and I had passion for those people that they were certainly oppressed by society, and just I just worked hard to make a positive difference, not always successfully because I was working in this huge bureaucracy, and bureaucracies care about themselves. They don't care about the people they're supposed to be helping. And it was frustrating for me a lot. But, I think God showed me that, no, you are the kind of person that I wanted working in those positions. I always tried, I wanted things better for the residents in those places, but I also worked hard to treat the workers in the facilities. So in institutions, you have the caregivers, and then you have the professional staff. And I was a professional staff, but the caregivers do all the hands-on work, most of the hands-on work. And I always tried to treat those people with respect and dignity, because if they don't do the work, whatever I come up with as a program for them to run or a way to help the clients, they won't do it. I tried to be helpful and positive with those people as well. So yeah, I'll just stop there.
No, it's so cool. So my question is, you mentioned that uh, God just recently kind of revealed this to you. You feel like that you hadn't really realized it until just recently?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Pretty disappointed with my work career because I didn't see things that I wanted to see accomplished. And yeah, but
Yet God came alongside you and said, no. I had you right where I wanted you.
Yeah,
You were
yeah,
doing the job I wanted you to do.
yeah,
How cool
exactly.
is that, right? We can tell ourselves, oh, we're a failure, we're this, and God comes alongside and just goes, no, you're not.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I consider myself a failure per se, but just oh, it was like a waste of time, you know. I should have gone into business and made a lot of money and that would have been better. But, you know, in my growing up at the time I did, you know, I wanted to save the world. You know, I think being interested in counseling, you know, was that's a way of trying to help people transform to deal with their issues and all that. So yeah, I just recall this story. I should probably tell you about. I think I think God prepared me a long time before that. He kind of created me to be involved in trying to fix rights because one time when I was in grade school, you know, we all ate lunch in the cafeteria together, the whole school at the whole same time. And one day, some teacher decided that we were being too loud. We all had to, at the end of lunch, we all had to stand down at the end of it was in the gymnasium. We had to stand there for the rest of the recess period. So ordinarily you finish lunch, you go out to recess, but we had to stand there quietly for the whole rest of the time. And apparently I had said loud enough for some teacher to hear that I don't think it's fair that all of us have to stand here when only a few of them were causing the noise. And I found out later that my mom got called into the principal's office where they told them what I had said. And my mom, bless her heart, said, well, you know, I kind of think he's right.
It's awesome.
So, um, yeah, but, you know, I think I've always been into right, justice, treating people fairly, and those are all things that God is into.
Yeah. Yeah. And he instilled that deeply into your heart.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So somewhere along the way here, we had four kids.
Nice.
We had two girls, and then there was a 4 year gap, and we had another girl, and then a 2 year gap, and we had a boy. And I still remember when we were in the hospital, and they tell my wife it's a boy. She goes, "A boy? We don't do boys."
God
Yeah,
also has a sense of humor.
yeah, but yeah, so you know you have two kids and you kind of get through the diaper phase with them and things are going good and then you have another kid 4 years later and I still remember coming home from work and here's this dirty diaper in the toilet, right? I'm going, whoa, we're back to
We're
this.
starting over again.
Yeah, great kids, love them a lot.
Yeah. And you got grandkids too now.
Yeah, yeah, so have three grandkids.
Awesome.
Two of my kids aren't going to have kids, so um, yeah, I think three's the max for us. But yeah, just great kids, great grandkids. Yeah. So where am I? Oh, I should start talking to you about church. Yeah. So when we moved to Port Orchard, which is where I live now and have lived since 1979, I think. Um, I don't remember exactly how we got invited to this church, but I think there were some neighbors down the street from us. We purchased this house and it was kind of up on the top of this little hill way out in the country in this little development kind of thing. And I think the neighbors for some reason that lived down at the bottom of this street were walking through our property for some reason. There was kind of a green belt in the back, and we stopped and talked to them. And then I'm pretty sure they invited us to church. So we went to this church called Grace Bible Church in Port Orchard, and started attending regularly. And it was community, but it wasn't community that, at least for me, fostered that personal relationship with Jesus. And to be fair to them, they were a dispensational theology church. So just dispensational theology means that they believe that God is dealing with people in eras of history in different ways, and that we're in the dispensation of grace, that Jesus came for the Jews, and now that era is over, that dispensation is over, and we're into the dispensation of grace. And and I can't honestly remember when it started, but sometime in Acts, where the message was preached to the Gentiles, and that started that whole dispensation. But we attended there for 28 years, long time, faithful members, became a member of a church. My parents never became members of the church. They attended the Nazarene church there for some reason. I don't know why, but um, so we did. And, I was on the board of the church, was chairman of the board at one point, but they didn't talk about a personal relationship with Jesus, didn't talk about Jesus really at all, because they were into the Pauline epistles, because Paul was the apostle to the Gentiles, and that's the dispensation that we're in. So, and it was pretty expository kind of teaching. And, we would spend 3 years in the book of Ephesians parsing words and going over like one verse a Sunday kind of thing. And I learned a lot about the Bible, have a lot of knowledge about the Bible up here. Okay. Didn't get much down in here about a personal relationship with Jesus. I remember early on that was frustrating to me, because I wanted to know, okay, if we spend 3 years parsing out Ephesians, what does it mean to me? What am I supposed to do with all that knowledge? How is that supposed to make a difference in my life? At the time, we called it the so what. Okay, you explained that verse to me. So what? What is that supposed to do for me, behavior wise, spiritually wise, changing me? So I guess I've always had that passion to change, but just never was given the opportunity to know how to do that. Things kind of came to a head, and we tried to get some changes made in the church, and it didn't happen. There were about 8 couples that were kind of involved in trying to get this change to come about, and several of us left. And these friends of ours that were in this group that had left, they had gone to Chapel Hill and Gig Harbor and told us, you should come, it's really great. We did. I think we attended first time the Sunday after Easter in 2008. And I think it was that fall that there was a pastor was doing a teaching for men, uh, how to be a better man, husband, father, those kinds of things. I think he was in the 3rd year of doing this, but it was on a Wednesday night. And at the time, I was working at this place called Rainier School, a big institution for people with intellectual disabilities up in Buckley. And it took me an hour or more to get home from there, and I wasn't able to attend that. But somehow they decided they would do something for men on a Saturday. And I thought, great, because at some point, it was being impressed upon me that I can't keep doing life alone. I gotta do life with men. I should probably back up. The time that we spent at Grace Bible Church in Port Orchard was great community, great friends. That didn't challenge me spiritually, though.
Yeah.
It was just
Yep.
good friendship.
Good
But
socialization. Yeah. Yep.
yeah, yeah. So I went to the first meeting on a Saturday, and we met in the what they call the prayer chapel, and there were 2 groups that met in there at the same time. One group sat at this table, another group sat at this table, and I was in a group with, the leader was this guy named Mike Fryman, and Dean Anderson was in that group, and then in the other group, Tim Eliason and Lowell Claver were in that group, among other guys. And those guys that I've mentioned are founding fathers of the Dudes group. And I just remember, Mike Fryman, the way he interacted, the way he talked, I just said, this guy has a personal relationship with Jesus. He has something going on personally with Jesus, and it just impressed me. And I doubt if he even knows that he impressed me that way, because I know I never told him that, but uh, things were starting to click in my head that, this might be a place where I need to go and start learning.
Yeah, and there's a different way to do this.
Yeah, yeah. So at Chapel Hill in Gig Harbor, they talk a lot about Jesus. That's practically all they talk about, learn more. So at Grace Bible Church, we didn't study Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but we certainly studied that at Chapel Hill. And there were times that I would just get tears in my eyes because I'm beginning to understand that Jesus loves me and how cool that is. I'm way over my 20 minutes, which
Keep
is
going. No, we're getting to the good stuff now.
yeah. So I don't honestly remember, and I actually talked to Tim just this past weekend, or yeah, Monday, I think, about how the dudes actually started. So that version of the two groups meeting on a Saturday, I think it ran its course, and then the next year they did something slightly different, but there was only one group of guys that met on Saturday. And I don't honestly know how I became the leader of dudes at that point, but I know I was involved in hassling the church to record the sessions on Wednesday night on DVDs so that we could watch them on a Saturday and interact with that material that way. And it was a struggle, but they did it. And then kind of one thing led to another, and we would meet in one room, and then we'd meet in another room. And
Yeah, I remember I went to the prayer room a few times, and that whole thing, for whatever reason, did not resonate with me. It just didn't. But as soon as it became one group, and we initially were meeting in one of the little classrooms from the old chapel, and that's where I started. That's
okay,
where I started attending. And I think it's that when it got to one group, that's where we started off at. And Tim's like, "Hey, why don't you come back? And, we're doing this, different thing and stuff." That was when I started attending, was there in that little classroom.
yeah, yeah. And then somehow they started emphasizing small groups and kind of formalizing it. And then so our group got formally recognized. And
Yep.
um yeah, and there was a core group of maybe 8, 9, 10 guys that would come pretty regularly. Those guys are still coming pretty regularly, but there's been an influx of new people, and some have gone, some have come. But I was thinking about this, KP.
Yeah.
The thing about dudes, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've talked in here about being in community in several places, none of which transformed me. Somehow we have got so I think, in your intro to this Love is Power podcast thing, you talk about community and all that. And and I was thinking about that. Yeah, but this community emphasizes that transformation, changing into who God designed you to be. We could easily be a social group, but I know I've fought that. Let's not go there. Let's continue to focus on how do we change? Let's interact with material around how do we change? And, I don't think we've ever studied a book of the Bible or done a Bible study video series, any of that. It's all been Bible-based stuff that's geared around changing, being the kind of person, man, God wants us to be. And I think that's critical for us.
I totally agree. I totally agree. I'll go back to being in that classroom. And I remember this very distinctly in that there was only about six of us, seven of us, I think eight of us on a big day. And I remember having a handout that was given to us. I punched three holes in it. I put it in a binder. And initially it was going to be kind of that was the intent, I think. Like, let's study the Bible kind of thing, or let's go through this study. And I remember that got abandoned pretty quickly because we would get together and we would just talk. And we would talk about our lives. We would talk about what's going on. And all of a sudden we figured out, I think by accident, that man, there's something really life-giving about about this sharing, right? Just sharing. And then the other thing that we started doing, and this is I'll that leads me to this picture. I want to share a picture, and I want kind of your reaction to this picture. Can you see it?
Yes.
So we started doing life together. We started doing things where it was sharing outside of that classroom, outside of wherever we were meeting, talking in the parking lot, going to each other's houses, helping people move. Go this here. What is this? What does this mean to you when you see this picture?
Yeah, this is down in Colorado, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
and these are a bunch of guys that have been in or are involved with dudes, and we're going to this conference, but we're all, this is dinner,
Yeah.
and we're doing it together.
Together.
And for me, that's not something that I could have done financially, but one of the guys in there essentially paid my way to go to that thing. So, um, yeah, great, great times.
We you know, we started one of the things that we started doing is that we started to figure out that there was material out there. There was people out there that could speak into our group, right? This was a John Eldridge thing that we went to down there, kind of I don't it wasn't a boot camp because Dean and I had gone to the two boot camps prior to this. But we came back so pumped up about John Eldridge that a group of us went down and went to this thing for a couple days down there, and it was such a blessing. And I remember what I specifically remember about that evening and that dinner is we didn't know where to go. And I love barbecue. I love barbecue so much I've become a carnivore, right? And I love barbecue. And we found some barbecue place, and I remember pulling up to it, and it's a converted house. And I remember thinking, oh no, this is not good. This is not going to be good. And I don't know how you remember, but I remember the food was spectacular. It was amazing. It was such a blessing. And it was just like, thank you, Jesus, for bringing us here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you talk about you and Dean going to those boot camps with Wild at Heart, and that when you guys came back from the first one, you were so changed, so different, so excited about what you had done and learned and all that. That's for me where I decided, yeah, I gotta let go and let God change me. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That I remember, I think there's a lot of turning points in dudes. That was one of them. That was one of them. Going to the first boot camp, we went to the second at boot camp as well, and coming and going and experiencing that with other men that actually became friends of ours, right? From Seattle, still friends of mine to this day. And what we experienced, we came back with so many stories. I remember we basically ate up the entire time. We spoke the entire time, and we were both just bouncing off the walls. We were so excited. And what got us going down this path is that we started using John Eldredge material. We started using Wild at Heart videos. We started we were playing things on little TVs, and we'd plug in little, the CDs and stuff that we would get. And we'd find any way to use some technology to speak into our hearts. And what the cool thing about John Eldredge, why I think John was so transformative for us, is that he brought Jesus alive. He brought Jesus alive. And that was one of the first times, like, Jesus was God and a dude and a guy all in one. Who
Mhm.
I remember him talking about, don't look at the scripture with this religious, we look at it through these religious glasses. I did that. I looked at it through these
Yeah.
religious glasses. And when you put it where it really is, in real context, and what he was really saying, he was a brilliant leader. He was funny. He was articulate. He was dynamic. He was deep. It was like, and it all came alive. And that was so mesmerizing, not mesmerizing, so transformative, right? It was just
Yeah.
enlightening. Like, this guy is someone I want to be my God, because he's that dynamic. Yeah, I think we all caught that. We all caught that.
Yeah. I know his book, John's book, Beautiful Outlaw, is the one that just he made Jesus a person. And I think he makes the point, you can't love somebody who's not, who's out there that you don't really understand or whatever, but you can love a person, and he made him a person in that book. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think the other thing that's important when you talk about our group and transformation is, um, you have to be willing to share your story, not share your story, share right now what's going on in your life, your hurts, your problems, your things that are upsetting to you, but you have to have a response that comes back to that, that's caring, that's kind, that speaks truth, but with love. And men don't do that well. And our group has struggled with that at times as well, where somebody
yeah,
will share something and we start solving that problem for them. And, I've just learned to cut that off, say, stop, you don't know how to solve it for them, but you can care and you can share how you deal with that problem. Because one of the things that I think that's so helpful in our group is, you don't have to have a lesson. We don't have to have a lesson. We can just start sharing, and then some guy shares, well, this is my experience and this is how it happened with me, and else shares, this is how I dealt with it. Or but there's no instruction, there's no teaching per se. And if you have that mindset when you come to the dudes that I want to change, you can get the information that you need to change. But let me just add one other thing. I'd say in the last 2, 3 years, all my readings, my Bible study, all of that, none of it do I try to get up here. I try to get it all in here. And I ask myself, what what is this saying to me about what I need to do differently? How do I need to change as a result of reading that?
absolutely, absolutely.
Whereas, 28 years of going to that other church, I got it all up here. It was designed to, well, how much can I learn about the Bible? Not what does it what does it impact me?
When a guy's sharing his pain, or even when he's sharing like, hey, I walked with Jesus here, sharing like God used me in this way. All of a sudden, when you're sitting there and you're listening and you're taking this in and you know this guy and you care about this guy, that impacts you. And it impacts you here in the heart, not here. And you're literally sitting there going, "Oh, you're either playing it in your head like, "Oh, I want to do that too. I want to walk with Jesus like that." Or, "Oh, if I come into this situation, that's a great lesson for me to
Yeah,
not deal with it in this manner." You start
yeah,
playing those those tapes in your head. You start rehearsing that stuff so that when you are in those situations, you do respond in love. You do respond the way Jesus wanted you to respond. Do we do it every time? No, which sucks. It's just so irritating,
yeah,
that we fail. But but transformation does come. You can come to, I've come to many dudes, barely said a word, sat and listened and walked away going, wow, that was amazing. That
yeah,
was amazing.
yeah. I I'll just, one of our Christmas traditions is to watch White Christmas every year, and I probably know that movie by heart, right? And I have this goal. I know it'll never achieve it, but I want to go through a whole day where I only say things from lines from that movie. But one of the lines somewhere in there, one of the characters says, well, if it weren't for the army, I'd never known how to peel a potato. And I was thinking, well, if it weren't for dudes, I'd never know how to do. And I started listing off those things. Those weren't things. So let's just take a couple like journaling. Everybody knows about journaling, right? But nobody instructed me. Nobody said, Gerald, sit down and start journaling. I just heard you and Dean talking about journaling and what you do and how you do it, and that taught me, that inspired me. Quiet time, I call it priority time with Jesus. Everybody knows you should have that, but nobody sat down and instructed me. I just learned from you guys. Oh, you do it like this, and oh, when you're doing quiet time, you do that. I would learn and incorporate those things in there. But those guys never knew they taught me that stuff. But
Well,
just by being there and sharing their lives with Jesus, you learn. If you want to be transformed, you can learn it.
you can learn, right? You'll learn what's important, and we're all learning from each other. So
Yeah.
one of the things I want to touch on is you led us for something like 12 years. And it ties back to what God shared about you just recently. You said about you're this person that cares about people. You're where I wanted you to be, and you have this heart for doing the right things. And I want to say this. You came for years and years and years, every day, every week, prepared. You prepared ahead of time. You had a family, you had to work, you had things other than us. Yet we took you for granted. We really did. And I apologize about that. And um it's just so beautiful of you how you gave yourself to the dudes, how you unselfishly came week after week with something prepared for helping us when we didn't have something to talk about, to give us something to talk about. And I just want to tell you how grateful I am for that, because you set the tone. You led us, and when we really needed somebody to lead us. And I'm grateful for that. And you did a magnificent job of it. So,
Well, thanks. I don't know if it was fantastic or not, but dudes is changing my life, and I'm not in the position where I want to not have some group like that involved with me. So part of it's probably selfish. I got to keep this thing going.
got to keep these stupid guys keep going because I can't let them all just wander off.
Yeah, exactly. I was on that transformation journey. So if we didn't have something talk about, you were going to talk about what was being talked to me about. So,
Yes.
it was in your best interest to come up with some.
I would love, do you have a couple favorite dude stories? Like just like when you think of dudes, this what comes to your heart that that you like to just kind of hold deeply in your heart.
I I'm just not good with remembering things like that. But there are a couple of things that I could talk about. One is early on in Dudes, we got involved with this lady named Lorraine, helping her with her house and fixing things, and we stacked some wood, chopped some
Yes.
wood for her, and
And she was raising her grandson.
yeah, yeah. And you know, God God wants people to be involved with the widows and the orphans, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking back, wow, we were doing God's work and I didn't even really think of it that way. But just that, that coming around and providing what little help that we could do for somebody who needed it, was really gets to me like that. And we had a great time doing it, and
Yeah.
I'm sure it blessed her. I guess the other story involves you, KP.
Okay.
You and I actually have this special bond around wood splitting.
Yes, we do. Absolutely do.
So a lot of what dudes have done over the years, not recently, but is we've done a lot of helping of people,
Yeah.
and a lot of them have been widows, but moving people that needed help, splitting wood for people, and you and I don't know how it happened, but we became this wood splitting team that I don't think I can split wood with anybody but you. We'd have these power driven hydraulic wood splitters, right?
Yep.
And the rounds would be, I don't know, probably,
Huge.
yeah, 16, 17 inches around, or diameter, and 16 inches high, and you have to hoist them up on the splitter, and then the guy moves the thing, and you turn them and split them so that they're into the size of pieces that can fit into a wood stove. The woman doesn't have to split them
Right.
anymore. And you and I got teamed up somehow, and I think it started out where I was running the splitter and you were putting them on, and we developed this rapport, whatever you want to call it, about
You and I
do
were
it.
in total sync with each other. And I would sweat like crazy, just like a fiend. And but man, it's just like it was like an adrenaline rush for me, to be honest with you.
You were red in the face, and I'm going, should we stop? And you're going, no, let's keep going. And then, one of us would take a break and somebody else would step in, and it just didn't flow. Just,
Work.
you try and tell the person, no, do it this way. And they just couldn't get the hang of it. And then you'd come back from your break and I'm going, yes. And then we just start hammering those rounds out. So, those are bonding good times.
Guys love doing stuff together. We love working together, right? Doing again back to this idea of doing life together.
Yeah.
Wound up making beer with with Tim and Dean, and it was because Tim gave me a beer making kit and stuff, and we would just figure out ways to interact with each other outside of the group, and we became friends. I got to tell you, the other not too long ago, the church I go to now, uh, once a quarter, they do a service Sunday. The last service Sunday we did was going to someone's house and splitting wood, and they had a splitter. So I get on the business end of it, right? Like normal. And the guy at the other end, I wanted to kill him. I just wanted, where's G? Where it's like, you do not know what you're doing here. It just made me crazy, man. And I mean, I got to tell you, I just thought of you. I'm just longing for G to be like running this machine properly and knows what someone that they're knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, we had it down. That thing you'd have to pull the lever back and the splitter is moving back and you're switching the round and I'm getting it back by the just about the time you get it set back down in the right position, it's being split. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's just great. We did a lot of that stuff. We moved people, we
yeah,
helped people. It was part of the bonding process for us and the growth process for us. It
yeah.
really was.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame that bureaucracy gets in the way of that.
Yeah, exactly. So, um, uh, here's a story I'll share. And I remember sharing this when we came back, and this story is gonna go in the book because it impacted us in a big way. And the words that this guy used reminded me instantly when I heard him of what you had said to us. And it's when Dean and I had gone uh, uh, to the boot camp, and you would go to this big gathering area, and then you'd go back to your cabins and with your smaller group and meet and go back and forth and stuff. And we're going down the hill to this big area where we'd meet the big cabin. It was gravel downhill, quite a little bit of a walk. We're walking there, and the next thing we know, John Eldridge is walking with us right next to us. It's like, hey, John, we're like starstruck. Oh, this is John Eldridge. And so uh, he goes, what brings you guys here? And it's like, well, we're in a men's group. We've been in a men's group at that time for 9 years. I remember us saying that in 9 years. And we've been using your material and found out about your boot camp. And we're kind of prattling on about, you know, using his stuff. And he stops in the road and he's staring at us. And we stop and we're staring at him and he's staring at us. And it's like this really uncomfortable moment. And he goes, what'd you just say? And it even got more uncomfortable when he said that. And we don't know what he's referring to, right? And he goes, did you say 9 years? It's like, yeah. He goes, 9 years? That doesn't happen. Guys don't meet for 9 years. I don't do that. He goes, I do this for a living. Guys don't meet for 9 years, man. And he goes, I'll never forget this. He goes, don't take that for granted. And it reminded me of you
yeah.
because that's been one of your favorite things to tell us over the years. And one of the biggest reasons I do this podcast and put myself out there and I'm writing a book, it's because you told us over and over and over, don't take this for granted.
Well, you know, I know from my counseling training and all that, groups are fragile and it doesn't take much for it to just be gone. It could be gone tomorrow if we don't guard it, if we don't work at it and just learn, all those years as I was a leader, just trying to work to make sure that that group doesn't go down, doesn't get sidetracked on stuff that will tear the group apart and keep things focused so that, we can continue to benefit from what we have to offer each other. But it doesn't take much for it to just be gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, I go back to your leadership, your commitment, and your reminding of us to don't take it for granted. And I think the guys that have been there, a lot of us been there for now many years, right? I guess we figured out the other day it's been 17 years since the beginning of it. I was not at the very beginning, but I was very close to the beginning. And uh uh and now we got new guys coming in. All of a sudden there's just been this, it seems like there's a need for this and we get new guys, younger guys coming in.
Yeah.
And what's amazing is that a few of these guys I've met with prior to their younger, different stage of life, they come and they come one time And I get a text right afterwards. I'm in, man. I'm all in. I want this. And we go out of our way to make sure they feel welcomed. We're a bunch of huggers. We hug each other.
That's the other thing I never would have learned if it weren't for dudes is how to hug a man.
You better get used to it because it's part of the deal. Uh, and it's just great to see these new guys coming along and go, oh wow, this is amazing.
If you,
I need this.
yeah, and talking about the changing of the group, it started out as a Chapel Hill group. It's not a Chapel Hill group anymore. It's a multi-church
Yep.
group
Yeah,
now,
for sure.
which
For sure.
is cool, right?
It is cool. It is cool. You know, in not taking it for granted, it has inspired um, me to try to try to share this with other people. That's why I do this podcast.
Yeah,
And that's why I wanted you to come on because you have been so instrumental in keeping the group together, getting it started, keeping it together, and being a leader that we needed so desperately. And realizing that, yeah, these things are fragile and they can end quickly. And we've come to this place where there's a number of us. I'm going to do this till the day I die if I can.
yeah,
I'm not going to not do this. It's just way too important to try to, at some level, pour myself into another guy and have him pour himself into me. We all need it.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if I should say this or not, but it's it oftentimes it's better than church.
It's better than church. Yeah, because
Yeah,
and the thing is, it isn't that church is bad. Church is
right.
awesome, right? You should go to church. Bible, it's the living word. It divides marrow and bone. It is very um uh it transforms us. Prayer transforms us. But I believe personally there's another component, and that component is finding a group of men to share life with, to do life with. And when you find that and you pour yourself into it, and you got to say no to stuff. We've met on Saturday mornings at 8 o'clock from the beginning, and we've just never stopped. You know what? Saturday mornings for a guy is golf time. It's work in the garage time. It's wash the car time. It's maybe just veg time because of the week, right? But we don't do that. And there's a lot you have to give up to do this. Yet it's worth it, man. Look in the rearview mirror. It's like I wouldn't have traded that for all the golf games that you could have given me for whatever, right? I wouldn't have made wouldn't have made that trade.
I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you about in the ways that I'm talking to you if it weren't for dudes and all those, it did and it is transforming me.
I feel the same way. And the thing is, what's interesting, what I really appreciate about your story that relates to me very strongly in my story is that I became uh, I I don't know when I became a Christian as a about a 12-year-old got exposed to Christ. My parents didn't go to church, and but really probably fully gave my life to Christ when I was about 27, and I grew and my life changed and God changed I mean, he put me on a different course immediately. But when I look at my growth, when I got into dudes and start pouring myself into this group of men and them pouring themselves into me, my growth just started to exponentially grow. And I'm still on that curve. I'm still on
Yeah.
that curve. And I believe that I'm going to a great church now. I got love my pastor, and and uh, he's a friend, and I'm grateful for that. That I have a pastor that's a close personal friend that I love dearly, and him and his family. And I love going to church, and I love reading my Bible. I love studying my Bible. And I love praying, and I journaling and all that. But if I have a problem in the middle of the night, I'm calling one of you guys. You're getting the call.
Yeah.
That's who I'm calling, and because you're my family, and I know I can reach out to you. You know you can reach out to me. And there isn't much we wouldn't do for each other.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome, man.
I don't have anything else to say, man. I
No,
talked way more than I should have.
it was fantastic. It was fantastic. I love you so much. And
Yeah.
I knew it would be like this. I knew it would.
Well, I'm glad I didn't fall into my listening mode and I kept talking even when I didn't feel comfortable.
It was a blessing, G. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm excited to post this, and uh, I
I
will.
was I was supposed to give a shout out to our friend Greg. He said, when you're on the podcast, you got to give me a shout out. So I don't know if you'll edit this out, but here's a
No,
shout out
heck
to
no.
Greg. But let me just add. So here's this guy who lives in California, never been to Dudes, I don't think. He's been up here once and did some wood splitting with us,
Yep,
but
yep.
never been to an actual group of dudes, but he participated via Zoom, right? He's just part of the group. And he asked me this year if I would do a read through the Bible in a year with him. And my instant reaction was, no, I'm not going to do that, because every Bible, read through the Bible thing I've done before has been a chore, something I've struggled to get through. And he's telling me, well, let's do this one. It's called the Bible Recap. And he sends me these videos about it and all that. And I pray about it and I think about it and I go, okay, I'll do it with you. And this has been the best reading through the Bible I've ever done. It's a great program, but the author of the program makes it really clear. You're trying to look for God on every page of the Bible, and I'm going, yeah, that I get that, but I just committed to doing that. And then the Bema discipleship started out in the book of Genesis, and I learned so much stuff that I had no clue was going on in the Bible and how it was laid out and designed and what it was attempting to do. That this has been the best reading through the Bible year. I'm even kind of into the genealogies. I used to skip over those, and I've learned that they're important, but I don't really know how yet. Hopefully someday I'll learn how those genealogies are significant. But yeah, so
Uh,
thanks,
t-
Greg.
yeah, I totally relate. Candy and I are doing the Bible recap, and it's by far the most enjoyable Bible in the year process I've ever gone through.
Yeah.
And then doing the Bayman with you and some of the other guys and dudes, and that's a deep dive, and I've loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I've actually read two books by the Jewish rabbi that the guy in Bema talks
Oh,
about.
really? Oh, how's that?
They're fantastic books. The one on Genesis just learns so much stuff about what's actually going on there.
What's the
And
name of that book? Remember?
something about mm, something about no, I can't remember,
Okay.
but if you look it up, it's
Yeah.
easily recognizable. The other one I've read is the Exodus you almost passed over, and this goes through that Exodus story, and it's just, wow, I never understood all that stuff before. And then he's talked about, I really should shut up here, but this is exciting stuff. But he talks about so Marty Solomon is the teacher in the Bema
Yeah.
discipleship program, and he has studied under this guy named Ray Vanderlaan from back in the Midwest somewhere. Put out this.
I'm a huge Ray Vanderlaan
Oh
fan.
yeah. So I've actually purchased a couple of the series that Ray Vanderlaan did related to the stuff that's being talked about in the Bema podcast. And it's just so good stuff. You learn about the trees in the desert and what and how they appear in the Bible and why it's important. And it's just like, wow, I didn't, it just transforms how you view what God's doing in the world.
Yeah.
And and Ray can get that finger up in your face and get pretty personal about how you're standing out here in the middle of the desert and he's done a 20-30 minute little talk about something, and then you got to apply it to yourself, because he's saying, how does that affect you? What do you do with that? So
Yeah. Yeah. That's great stuff. I mean, and through the years with dudes, we've found those different people, right? We found those
yeah,
different, the Paul Trips of the world.
that was always my go-to. When you guys didn't have anything
I
to talk
know.
about, you knew you were going to get a Paul
We
Tripp devotional.
we all hated it. Like, no, I don't want any more Paul Tripp. He's way too challenging at times.
Exactly. I don't want to transform that
Yeah,
much.
really, you're asking too much. Okay, G, just get off the Paul trip. Okay,
Yeah,
man. Well, this has been a real pleasure, my friend. This is awesome.
I've enjoyed it a lot, really, seriously.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'll probably um, uh, publish this for dudes in the time for dudes this Saturday will be my goal.
Okay. Whatever. If you don't publish it at all, that's fine with me.
Well, it's gonna get published, and I just appreciate you putting yourself out there like this. You know what? I get it. It's not easy. It's not easy to do this,
Yeah.
and it's emotionally challenging. It's you're recording yourself, but and putting it out there for people to judge. But at the end of the day, we're doing this for God. We're doing this for Jesus. We're doing this because we love Jesus. That's why we're doing it.
Yeah, I just realized there were a couple things I was going to say that I thought were important that I just totally glossed over, but that's fine.
Good. That's we'll do the version 2 someday. We'll do a second one.
Yeah, I'm old. You may not get around to the second.
You're not that much older than me, brother.
Okay, man.
Thank you. Awesome
Thanks for having
job.
me do this. It was good for me.
Good. I'm blessed by that
Yeah.
tremendously. So, okay, have a great evening, and
Okay.
I'll see you Saturday.
Yeah. Okay. Love you, brother.
Love you, man.
Bye.
Bye.